Good evening. Good to see you again. Or, well, be seen by you, I guess, since I can't see you. Last week, Jesus was taken to the temple, circumcised, and presented and given a name. Simeon and Anna gave, testimony about him. This time, so Jesus is 8 days old last week. This week, we're thinking he's probably around 2, and as I get through the passage, we'll talk about it. This is a little bit longer, most likely, than last time, so bear with me. There's several things to talk about. We're going to talk about the visit of the Magi. Starting at the beginning of chapter 2. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of King Herod, wise men from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star at its rising, and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was deeply disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. So he assembled all the chief priests and scribes of the people and asked them where the Christ would be born. "In Bethlehem of Judea," they told him, "because this is what was written by the prophet. And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, because out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." That's from 2 Samuel. Then Herod secretly summoned the wise men and asked them the exact time the star appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. When you find him, report back to me so that I too can go and worship him." After hearing the king, they went on their way. I'm going to stop there for a second. We'll talk about a couple of the things we see here. Probably my favorite verse in here is verse 3. When King Herod heard this, he was deeply disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. Kind of like those things, when mama's not happy, nobody's happy. Well, when the king, who doesn't seem to hesitate to lop off people's heads, isn't happy, nobody in Jerusalem's going to be feeling safe and comfortable or happy. But these wise men, they come out of the east. We don't know how many. 3 works great because there are 3 gifts, but we don't know. We know there's at least 2 because it's wise men, not man. But we don't know. It could be a dozen. It could be 6. 3. But 3 works just fine. Again, these are the kind of things that don't require any real argument. These are not things to get angry with your friends about if they disagree. It's not that important. We know that these wise men, these astrologers, people who study the stars, saw a star representing the birth of the King of Israel rose into the sky, and they thought this was important enough for them to pick up and come west for them and to meet him and give him gifts so that they would be blessed. And, of course, Herod is a schemer. We'll see that more as time goes on. But he is definitely, he says, "Go and search carefully for the child. When you find him, report back to me so that I too can go and worship him." Well, we'll see how that turns out. So they went on their way, and there it was, the star they had seen in its rising. It led them until it came and stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overwhelmed with joy. Entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and falling to their knees, they worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their own country by another route. So this is the whole, little drummer boy scene, but it's not at the birth. The term they use when they talk about the child, they use the term teknon in Greek, which it generally would be the same thing when we would say toddler. Kind of a 2 to 3 year old. And so some time has passed. And again, we saw that when we said they went back to Nazareth, but then Matthew says they're still here. But Luke's gospel never said they went that day. They just says they eventually went back to Nazareth, their own town. Because none of these guys are worried about calendars and time very much. They're just trying to present you the story as best they can. So, here we have this. They enter the house, they give him gold, frankincense, myrrh. All of these are associated with either royalty in the case of gold, and or death in the case of frankincense. It's a herb that helps get rid of the smell of dead bodies, kind of cleanses the air. So, kind of a foretelling. But it was an expensive spice too. So we shouldn't get too hung up on the foreshadowing that maybe the wise men wouldn't have known. But it was an expensive gift. It was definitely a kingly gift. So you have this moment in time. Mary and Joseph are in their home. That's what it seems to say. They're the place they were, where the child was. And they entered in. They fall into their knees. They worshipped him. They offered him these gifts. They saw him as a great king. And then, they leave. And of course, because they've been warned in a dream, so maybe they stayed for a day or two, or maybe they just spent the night and then they left the next morning. And they went back to their home country without telling Herod, because maybe they didn't trust him, which would have been smart. But we remember, this is Matthew's gospel. We're going to see more about dreams. Going on to the verse 13. After they were gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, "Get up, take the child and his mother, flee to Egypt, stay there until I tell you. For Herod is about to search for the child to kill him." So he got up and took the child and his mother during the night and escaped Egypt. He stayed there until Herod's death, so that what was spoken by the Lord through the prophet might be fulfilled. Out of Egypt I called my son. So it's kind of strange, I can see Joseph closing the door after the wise men leave and looking at Mary and going, that was weird. And of course, they get ready for bed. They go to bed, and suddenly Joseph has this dream. And as we've already discovered with Joseph, when God speaks to him in a dream, either through an angel or a dream straight up, he's obedient. So when he's told to take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt, stay there until I tell you, because for Herod is about to search for the child and kill him. So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and escaped to Egypt. They stayed there until Herod's death. Then we kind of skip back, and we're going to look back to Herod here, who's going to confirm a lot of our worst suspicions about Herod. Then Herod, when he realized that he had been outwitted by the wise men, flew into a rage. See, nobody's safe. Nobody's safe. When the king's not happy, no one is happy. He gave orders to massacre all the boys in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years old and under. Hence the concept of the term teknon, that this visit was probably done later, when Jesus is around 2 years old, maybe a year and a half. I don't know. But Herod is being very specific. And for a megalomaniac who's ordering the murder of tiny children, he is being very specific. He doesn't say kill all the boys. He just kills the ones that are 2 and under. So he's for at least for the day and age, and for him, a surgical strike. He's going after just the thing that would be the target, because any child that's going to be the king of Israel means this child's going to kick him off his throne, or his children off their throne. And neither one is going to be acceptable to Herod. So we have that confirmation, 1, of the age of Jesus, 2, that Herod isn't a really great guy. And then what was spoken through Jeremiah the prophet was fulfilled. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping in great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, and she refused to be consoled because they were no more. Just that prophecy that this kind of slaughter would take place. Now, this would be one of those, like, I'm not very good at prophecy. I have to read something else that spells it out for me. If I'm reading the Old Testament, I don't always see any connection to the future. Isaiah is pretty easy. He's pretty straightforward, but the rest of them aren't. Like this passage, I don't think I would have probably noticed. But it's important for us to catch those connections. And Matthew is once again setting out, that's the thing he likes to do. We've already seen 3 different touches of prophecy from the Old Testament, so that people who read this or hear this gospel would know that he is the Son of God, the promised Messiah of Israel. So they stay until Herod's death, probably a couple years, maybe up to 4, depending on the calendar, because again, we don't know exact dates. After Herod died, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt. Again, a dream, saying, "Get up and take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, because those who intended to kill the child are dead." So he got up, took the child and his mother, and entered the land of Israel. So this whole segue, to me, is just God's providence, even for his child. You remember, he'd already worked very diligently to select 2 people, Mary and Joseph, who were righteous and obedient to him, to be Jesus' earthly parents. But then he was going to have to send them away. He's going to send them to Egypt, a land they don't know. They don't speak the regular language, because Egypt's more Coptic than Aramaic. So they spoke Greek just like the people there for business. So he could still get along, but he's an itinerant worker, whether he's a carpenter or a handyman. It depends on how you read the definition. But it's okay. But it's very difficult for him to get work, I would imagine. I mean, it'd be like coming here to the United States. You can have a degree in rocket science and you end up being a janitor kind of thing. So God provides for Joseph and Mary and Jesus by having the wise men come and arrive right before this massacre, right before they need to flee. He provides them with these great gifts of money. We never hear about this money again. Well, my guess is Mary and Joseph sold it when they sold the frankincense and myrrh, and used the gold to buy food and shelter in Egypt. To me, it seems like a no-brainer that that's what that money was for, that God's providence was right there, preparing and already prepared, really, and providing a place for them, so that all the things that Joseph would worry about as the protector and provider for the family are taken care of. But it says, so he got up and took the child and his mother and entered the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was ruling over Judea in place of his father, Herod, he was afraid to go there, because, again, that makes Archelaus the king of Judah, or king of Israel. His son has been declared to be the king of Israel by several people. Archelaus probably would be just as mad and dangerous as his father. But there'd been a big shift in the politics of the region. And so instead, he goes up and settles into the town of Nazareth. So he comes back to Nazareth. It's his town, so he's familiar with it. A chance to work, a chance to know people. But it also, once again, fulfills what was spoken through the prophets, that he would be called a Nazarene. And that's from, I do believe, Joel, the book of Joel. So just in this little space, we've got 4 different prophecies, 3 dreams, and a massacre. But again, 3 gifts, and the providing for his son. And that's all of chapter 2. And that's, where we'll stop for today. But this story is vital. It's one of those reasons, man, a friend of mine in seminary, we talked about the idea that we should put the wise men like somewhere far away in our Christmas decorations, like, on the other side of the house or something, to show they're coming, but they're not there yet. Maybe put a little light above them so that we can talk about the star. But we see that chronologically, this is going to be a bigger and bigger challenge as we move through the gospel, because here we are at the early stages, and we already have Luke saying they went home right after the baptism. He doesn't say specifically that, but he alludes, the way it's written, it seems like, he went back to Nazareth. But in Matthew's gospel, they're in Bethlehem for a couple years. My guess would be, they're saving up money to move back. Moving this kind of distance, I know it doesn't seem like that on the map. It's a tiny little speck. But when you're doing it by, on a mule or a donkey, it's going to take a while. And you're going to need provisions. And then when you get there, you're going to have to, find housing. And you're going to have to eat until you can get work. So it's an important thing to remember that Jesus wasn't born into a wealthy family where they could just jet off to the next location. This family is, I don't know if I would call them destitute, but They weren't rich, that's for sure. They were poor, um, and they needed all the help they could get, and God was there providing every step of the way. So I think it's a story not just about our Savior, but about where our trust should be placed. All right, well, you have a great night, and we'll see you later.